Hi everyone, welcome back to Brianna's bookshelf. So today I'm going to be talking about books that I would recommend for winter, and even more specifically, books I would recommend if you are in the mood for like a dark Gothic winter kind of vibe. So I feel like this year may be the year for a like dark Gothic winter because we had Frankenstein coming out. I feel like there's another, I feel like I've seen the trailers for Wuthering Heights come out, and that's also giving me that vibe, even though that movie isn't coming out until February, I believe. But yes, the vibes are there. I'm gonna put up a little inspiration board here of kind of the vibes I'm talking about, what the imagery is like. I'm imagining dark lighting, perhaps the soundtrack of Charlie XCX's new singles. If you haven't heard them, go listen and you'll know exactly what I mean. They completely fit this vibe. Also like castles, the woods in like a dark European type of setting, and just general snowy, cold, like blue lighting vibes, which is certainly what I'm getting outside, so it feels like it's that season. So I have 10 books to recommend today if you want to dive deeper into that kind of atmosphere this winter. So the first one is Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh. I read this earlier this fall and I really enjoyed it, but I do actually think this would be best read during the winter time because this book does take place in the lead up to Christmas, and I think it might also take place on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. So it is very much in the winter season, and while not like a traditional Gothic sense, this has like a very dark and bleak atmosphere to it. We're following Eileen and she lives in this small town. There's a lot of descriptions of the like snowy landscapes. It just feels very dark. She lives in this like old dark house that's not well taken care of, and she has like, there's just a lot of dark themes. Like her father is an alcoholic, and Eileen herself, she works at basically like a juvie center. So all around there's a lot of like dark and kind of hopeless feelings, and it does go in a super weird direction, which is I felt was very unexpected and enjoyable. But all throughout the book we do have those kind of cold, snowy, somewhat depressing honestly, and also like dreadful atmosphere happening. My next recommendation is going to be Terror by Erica McKeen, and I feel like this ends up in literally all of my recommendation videos, so please don't come for me, but I just think that more people need to read this book and it's super interesting. And yeah, this is like a indie horror book, and our main character Frances, she lives in the basement room of a house with other girls on her college campus. And Frances, she's kind of like questioning reality, and she's kind of stuck in this loop where she keeps like laying in her room. She's not really going out or doing anything. She's not interested in making friends or her classes. And she's just kind of sitting there and ruminating on these past memories, things that have happened in her life. And it really puts you in those flashbacks. And then when you come back to the present time, there is this really creepy atmosphere of Frances being constantly in this dark, cold basement, which definitely reminds me of a winter time. And eventually she ends up trying to leave the basement and finding out that she has been locked inside of it, or at least that's what she thinks. And we have to kind of figure out, is she a reliable narrator or not, and what is really happening. And it is certainly very creepy, certainly kind of a winter, kind of a winter vibe. There's also this element of things are like tapping on the walls and tapping on the windows, and that very much feels like a Gothic story to me, where there's like things outside and you don't know what they are. Then I have Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. And while this one is certainly a little more on the fun and whimsical side, it does have that Gothic atmosphere. And this is a chunky girl, okay? She is a thick book. This took me a while to read. I read it last winter, but I did really enjoy it, and I did feel like winter was the perfect time to read it because it moves quite slowly and it really has that winter atmosphere. So we're essentially following Mr. Norrell, and he says like the last magician in all of England. And there's like these other people that call themselves magicians, but they are only theoretical magicians. They don't actually practice any magic, they only study it. And Mr. Norrell, he does in fact practice magic and can do like all kinds of things with magic, but he's pretty hesitant to let people watch him. He's very like stuck up, and he's obsessed with books, and he would rather just be holed away in his library than proving anything to anyone. But he then has this younger protege, Jonathan Strange, who at first wants to learn magic from Mr. Norrell, but they end up kind of butting heads and go their separate ways, and then they become kind of like competitors in this scene of up-and-coming scene of magic in England. And this takes place, I think, in the 1800s, I want to say. It's like 17 or 1800s in England, and a lot of it is in London. There's also a part where they travel to, I think it's like Italy. There's a part of it that's in Italy. So it's very much giving this like dark England vibes. Like they're always having their fireplaces on, they're studying magic, they're in their libraries, their studies, they're bundled up outside against the cold. So this is quintessentially what you would think of with like kind of a darker English atmosphere plus magic. It is dramatic, dark academia at times, but it's also quite fun and goofy at times as well. Then, not Gothic in a traditional sense, but in a kind of modern interpretation, we have Krampus by Brom. If you've never read any of Brom's books, they are this very unusual size, which is quite interesting, very floppy, and they do have illustrations by Brom throughout them. So in the middle there's some color illustrations, and then at the beginning of each chapter there is a little illustration as well, and I think it's a wonderful touch. Just if you're interested in trying out Brom's horror, I think that that's something that's really unique about it. But this story specifically is about Krampus, and if you don't know the background behind that, it's kind of like this Germanic folklore idea that Krampus is kind of like the anti-Santa in a way. He comes and punishes bad kids, like beats them with sticks, puts them in a sack, carries them away. And this is something that I believe is still celebrated in different parts of like Germany and Austria today, that they do like Krampus parades and things like that. So he's definitely still a character in that folklore. But this is a really interesting interpretation of that lore, where we see Krampus in America. So this does take place in the South, and Krampus is kind of shackled, his powers are shackled, and he's trying to overcome his enemy, who is Santa Claus. And he has to enlist the help of some humans along the way. And there is also this kind of like Norse mythology thing that is threaded throughout as well. And overall, it was just super unique, very different than other things I've read, and probably the only like holiday themed horror I've ever read that didn't feel gimmicky. Like it felt like it could really stand on its own and solidly be a good book without it being specifically attached to Christmas. So I would definitely recommend this if you want something that is more horror leaning, but certainly winter. Then I have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I'm actually currently reading this, hence why I have a bookmark in it. And I'm about halfway through, so I can't really give a full review on it at this point, or my full opinion. But I did not realize just how winter coded this book is. I always assumed this was like very fall, very Halloween. But this book is very much giving winter gothic to me, because I didn't realize that a lot of this takes place in the Alps, and there is like all these snowy mountain scenes. We also get some scenes on like a boat that is going through these icy waters. And yeah, I had no idea that this kind of cold atmosphere was going to be so pervasive in this book. So if you didn't know that either, I would recommend picking this up. And yes, I am planning to see the movie. And yes, this did partially inspire this video. Then I have Babel, or Babel, however you want to pronounce it, by R.F. Kuang. And this is a fantasy, but it definitely has dark academia vibes. And to me, it feels very winter coded. I can't remember specifically from when I read this if there are like any scenes that take place in the snow or around the holidays or anything like that. But I just remember the whole description of them being at Oxford, feeling like it was always dark and kind of cold outside, which I feel like is kind of a thing that you see a lot in dark academia because it certainly lends itself to that atmosphere. But in this book, we are following a group of students who attend the language school at Oxford, a fictional language school in which they use metal to translate words, and this actually does magic for them. So it's kind of a confusing magic system to explain, but I thought it was super unique. And there is a lot of commentary in this book on race, on colonialism, on the appropriation of languages and customs and, you know, tools and technologies from different cultures. So I think this is a really interesting read on so many levels. It's got the fantasy, it's got the dark academia, it has real substance and depth. And I personally did read this during the winter time, and I think that that is the perfect time to read it because it does feel quite cold and at times bleak. Sticking to the dark academia theme, we have The Secret History by Donna Tart. Most of you have probably heard of this. This is pretty much the dark academia book to end all dark academia books, at least according to the internet. And I read this a few years ago. I absolutely loved it. I really need to read this again. And this is again about a group of students. These students go to a liberal arts college on the East Coast of the US, and they are, for the most part, very like rich and kind of from like old money, and they're all super obsessed with like the classic languages and reading and translating like Greek and Latin and things like that. And then we have our narrator, who is a little bit of a misfit with this group. I think he's from California, and he's not from the kind of wealth that the rest of this friend group is. So he kind of enters as slightly an outsider, and he becomes our narrator of what takes place between these friends during the course of this school year. And a lot of it does take place during kind of winter break, and there's a lot of memorable scenes during that part where these students are, you know, walking around in the cold and the snow on this college campus. There's descriptions of the architecture, there's descriptions of them reading these classic languages. There is murder, and there is like addiction and just all kinds of topics. And again, this is one that feels like dreary, bleak, snowy, cold, like as if the whole outside was like this blue before it gets dark. And that's really what this is all about, is that this book really gave me that feeling all throughout. And I can't explain why, but I was just obsessed with this and enamored when I read it. So I would highly recommend, if you haven't tried it, to please try it. Then we have The Witch's Heart. And this is kind of a difficult book to categorize. I guess it's kind of like a mythology retelling. We're following our main character, Angerboda. She's a witch who's basically cast out of like Valhalla, not Valhalla, but like, words are not coming to me right now, but this is Norse mythology. And yeah, she's cast out of the realm of the gods down to this kind of like earth-like realm. I don't think she's actually cast to earth, but something similar. Maybe it was earth, I don't remember. and she is kind of trying to remember who she is, going through these different kind of lifetimes. Again, this goes through different seasons, but the most memorable feelings to me from this book were having to do with the winter time. She found her own little hut and would kind of settle in and cozy up during the winter months in this hut. And there is also a bit of a love story here, though somewhat of a twisted one, between Angerboda and the god Loki. And yes, it is a little bit twisted. There's a lot of emotions. There is kind of like a family saga. There's a lot of mythology. And I really love this, and I think it's a perfect wintertime read. And then for two that I don't own physically, the first one I did just recently read, and that was Belladonna by Adalyn Grace. This is the first book in a young adult fantasy trilogy, and this follows a character who is able to see the physical embodiment of death, who is kind of like this grim reaper character who she calls Death. And throughout her life, many people around her die. She's always able to see him and wonders why. She soon learns that she's able to summon him by getting herself kind of on the verge of poisoning, and they begin to communicate, and she's curious about him, he's curious about her and why she can see him and communicate with him. And from there, she gets sent to go live with some family members, and there are some kind of mysterious illnesses running through this family and just kind of all around shady activities. So we get this mystery element, we get this romance with Death himself, and we get this old like Victorian manor estate that our main character moves into and kind of has to figure out the puzzles of what weird things are going on there. So I would say that is pretty winter gothic if you ask me. And then last, kind of a different one, is City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab, otherwise known as V.E. Schwab. And this is, I believe, a series, but I've only read the first one, and it is middle grade, which is not something I usually talk about on my channel. Not a big middle grade reader. A few years ago, I did read a little bit more of it, but still not a ton. But when I do read middle grade, I really enjoy like a spooky middle grade. I just find it extremely cozy. And in that book, we're following our main character. I think her name was Cass, and she is able to see ghosts, and she ends up going to Edinburgh with her family. And of course, there are so many ghosts there, and it is super wintry, and there's all this architecture and you know, just those general vibes of Edinburgh. I mean, I've never been there, but just hearing about it, seeing pictures, it definitely gives a winter gothic feeling to me. And yes, our main character, she has to talk to these different ghosts there and kind of solve a mystery with them. So it's very cute but spooky at the same time, and wintry for sure. So those are 10 books that I think you should read if you want to cultivate that dark gothic winter atmosphere for yourself in the coming winter months. And please let me know down below if you have any other recommendations for books that you think fit this vibe. I'm definitely going to be looking into more books similar to this atmosphere this winter. And thank you so much everyone for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.